Well, firstly, I want to say thank you for the huge input you've had on Mining Journal Select, and I think everybody here can agree that you've done a fantastic job of chairing today, and really asked some key questions of our speakers, and a lot, I think, for everyone to take away and think about. So now it's a chance for you to sit on the other side and answer some questions. Rick Rule made a comment earlier today that he's investing in exploration because nobody else is. With your investment hat on, what's your focus at the moment, and where do you see the near to mid-term investment opportunities?
Yeah, so I do actually believe that exploration should be part of the puzzle, and I disagree a bit with what Rick said about 1 in 3,000 odds. Because I think in reality what happens is the most successful exploration is actually taking place near existing businesses. And those odds are actually 1 in 5. And small mines are becoming medium-sized mines are becoming big mines. So once you get your presence on the ground, even if it's small, that exploration nearby that area actually generally has a pretty good track record of finding new things. Frontier exploration can have high odds, and then the key is knowing when to basically cull that spending. And also, I think the most successful explorers, I've known Robert Friedland since '88, he still gets the daily reports from the geologists that are in a tent as CEO. And there aren't many other CEOs that will actually get daily reports from the geologists in the tent. That does two things. But most importantly, what it does, it inspires those geologists to work harder. And the same geologists that were there that discovered Oyu Tolgoi are out there discovering the new deposits in Africa, and were part of the discovery suite before that. So I think senior management, to care about exploration, is actually part of that driver. But I guess what, if I look at what I'm most bullish on, what I would say as an investor, I just have to say, what am I spending my time on? 6 months ago, I told my wife I was retired. 3 months ago, I told her I'm semi-retired, and she doesn't believe either of them. So I'm actually traveling a lot. I'm doing a lot of things, but they're reflecting where I think this, the big opportunities are over the next 5 years. And so one of them, I've been on the board of Franco-Nevada for the past 5 years. It's been a tremendous learning for me. It's been really, really great to be on that board. It's a great team. You heard Paul yesterday, but I do believe that two things about gold. One is you absolutely cannot predict the price. But when you're wrong about everything else, and basically the economy does something that is too horrible to contemplate, you want to have some gold in your portfolio. And ultimately, for me, that's the real value of gold, is that if that thing happens, like your house burning down, you want insurance. If something happens bad in the world, you want insurance. And don't try to get too detailed about whether the price is $1,300 or $1,400 or $1,500. Make sure you can make money at virtually any point on that price curve. I do buy the copper story. I am a little worried about where copper is going to be 5 years down the road if this exuberance does take off a little too much, whether on a substitution for aluminum or something else, or someone finds a big new deposit. But I was attracted to Nevada Copper on the basis that it's copper. It's in Nevada, so the resource nationalisms, they're there, license operates there, but the risks are so diminished from some of the other places that I've worked over my career that it's almost like a resource nationalism holiday compared to some of these places. So I do think investing in the US is actually a good place to be. And I also recognize that even if you're in the US, there's some very good deposits out there, but they're very difficult to permit, and some of them may not be permitted even for a generation. So permitting does matter. So fully permitted, ready to go in Nevada, copper, for me, that checked my boxes on that. But that sounds pretty low risk. So is that enough to get the juices flowing? And so I said, I got to do something that really gets the juices flowing. So I also like the Cobalt story. I don't like the fact that so much of it's coming from the DRC. I don't like that so much of it is ultimately going to be dominated, as we just heard, by Chinese refiners and processors. And I do think the world's going to say, if that's that future world of cobalt, well, I'm going to double the pressure on the engineers to substitute it out for something. I don't care what it is, just substitute it for something. So I've joined a private consortium to look for a completely different, novel source of cobalt that's not on any of the studies we saw here today. It's disruptive technology that, look, it either will work or it won't. But if it works, it's going to be game-changing. So for me, something that is in that space, element of risk to it, but again, I'll put my time, my efforts into that because, again, that's something that I think could make a difference.
Okay. I mean, you just touched on Nevada Copper there, and you have actually sat and listened to every single presentation over the past 2 days. So aside from those that you may have a existing personal interest in, which other projects would you say were standouts for you?
I was worried you were going to ask that question, so I did make a list. So I was coming through, I was just sort of thinking about those, and look, some of these are based upon the quality of it, or I've known about these. In some cases, I thought there was some really good presentations and what the focus was. So it's not what I'd call this is an investment list, but I think that people want to just, I think, well done in terms of what I heard. I think the first place I would talk about is on exploration, and that is that what I saw was, it was a good thing to some extent that most of the explorers were leveraging off of old projects. They were basically taking things that I saw Sarco, I saw Kennecott, I saw Anaconda, I saw Barrick, I saw lots of companies that have been there, they withdrew, they left a good database. It needs a new generation of geologists, a new generation of energy, maybe technology to take it forward. I think that's all good. But at the same time, I regularly hear that the gold industry has run out of ideas and that where is gold going to go. So I have to say that the presentation on Pilbara Gold I really liked. And again, it's probably a binary type thing. It's either going to be there as a gold conglomerate that stretches over 100 kilometers, or it may make a couple placer mines in the future. So it's the kind of thing there, but that's the type of thing the industry should be putting some bets on. So I thought that was a good presentation. The presentations up until the end were light, as I said, on innovation, and I said what I said on the royalty streaming companies. But I did like what MetalX was talking about on Nifty. I know the journey that they've had from their takeover of that business, and they have revitalized it. They put new energy in it. I like that the technology they're using for ore sorting. And it's a good example of what I'd call the incremental technology that actually will be happening behind the scenes that will make mines that look like they were getting pretty tired. They'll give them a breath of life, or we'll take mines like the Pilbara that were at $40, endeavor to get lower to $20, and I think that's only the start of that continued progress downward. So I thought that was a good example of the kind of technology that you as investors probably should be just keeping your ears tuned to. I do like Nevada Copper, I said that, but I can't say anything more. But for copper in the US, Rick, I do like Trilogy, not only because I was on the project back in the 70s, but it is in the US. I do think that the road issues that have bedeviled the project for years and years and years are getting sorted out. The grade is going to be there, the open pit there. You've got to keep the costs down, you've got to keep the CapEx down, but that's the type of thing I think could be something that would be interesting. I think before I leave copper, I don't want people to think I'm just US focused on that. I thought the Central Asian Minerals presentation was good today because I love those 60% EBITDA margins, the dividends to the shareholders. About the only presentation that actually recognizes CSR is going to, particularly in the countries that they're in, does make a strategic difference. So I thought that does recognize some merit. I guess my final one would have been, I said that was it, and then Fortune Minerals presented. And I've heard that presentation before, and I do think it may be the right commodity at the right time in the right location, and that gold byproduct doesn't hurt. So it has a pretty good net cost of production, very resilient for if we do see lower cobalt prices. Mm-hmm.
So you just mentioned there the presentation specifically on the Pilbara, but it's actually been an area of a bit of controversy in terms of where people fall with that specifically, and that as well as sort of
Pilbara Gold.
Pilbara Gold, and that as well as sort of the gold versus cryptocurrency, which you've also mentioned. So I think I probably know the answer to this now, but what's your take on that, and where do you fall?
Well, look, first of all, John deserves the accolades for calling the top at 17,000. He said if that's the top, but I'm sure he didn't go short. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been in the room today. But I think he did call that. I had this conversation with him back in December and January, and that was that the part of the problem with Bitcoin is that the way the algorithm was designed to keep the supply limited is really to make it more complex to make the next one. But I don't think the original originators would have thought enough about, by doing that, it makes each transaction equally more transactionally difficult than the one before that. So 5 years ago, you heard people you could go to the coffee shop and use it and this and that. Now it's getting to the point where the only ones that can actually use it would be those that can afford a very high transaction cost, maybe for central banks and big movements if they ever got into that area. But my sense is there's a need for a Bitcoin version 2 to figure out how to keep the supply limited, but also to actually create something that has got some transaction cost. I do think central banks are going to begin to play into that space, as will the big banks, the JP Morgans, et cetera. But I think they've got to make sure it's seen as for legitimate purposes, not illegitimate purposes. So the risks of money laundering, the risks of the wrong people using it for the wrong purposes, and certainly the whole area of cybersecurity would be things that would have to be sorted out in that next version.
Mm-hmm. Just to return to one of your sort of key takeaways that you just mentioned there, which is focus on management. And one of the key criteria for the Mining Journal Select was looking at the management team of projects and making it a focus when you're choosing something to invest in. Given your background as an operator, what do you look for when you're looking at new management teams? And who do you think is potentially the best of the new breed of management?
So I'm not a sporting fan. But when I hear anyone talk about great sporting teams, they usually don't talk about individual players. They talk about the team and its collective capabilities, but more importantly, is that team working together? Are they cohesive? Do they know what the other person's thinking before that other person even says something? Can they basically, in a small group, do great things? So I actually think that, that those organizations that embrace a team culture, that try to create a balance of different skills and capabilities, that actually are not discouraged from actually saying what they think. And many of the best people at the top are actually quite difficult at getting bad news to them quickly because they just don't want to hear it, or they will not encourage their staff or even their top team to talk through that. So the team has to be able to engage, they have to be able to talk, they have to have the breadth of experience, they have to have the depth of capability. They should have a good, diverse mix between senior people and up-and-comers with new ideas. And as we heard, you can't do that with just half the population. So actually, gender diversity, all forms of diversity have to be part of that solution. But I would say it is more than just the individual. So some individuals do get lucky. Many individuals get lucky once. The second time they stumble. So it's usually the team that prevails over the long term.
So looking kind of more at the broader market, we recently ran an event over in Australia, Resource Stocks, and there was a lot of talk there around whether we're sort of reaching the top of the cycle. However, the last 2 days, I think, has reflected a bit more of an optimistic view on the North American mining markets and investment. So where are your thoughts about where we are in the cycle and how you see that going?
Over the years, you would never heard me use the term supercycle because I'm still of the belief that we're still in a secular shift associated with these 2 billion people. And it's also getting more and more difficult to create the supply. Now, we're getting, because of sort of a global financial crisis that we haven't seen in 4 generations, and we had monetary stimulus, we're in the UK, we haven't seen for 300 years. In terms of the rates of the Bank of England, you have had extraordinary macro impacts. And I think that has created a very volatile set of cycles, which I think still is within a secular trend. So I thought Rick's comment about the highs getting higher and the lows also getting higher does make sense, but you're gonna be navigating in what I'd call more and more turbulent waters.
Okay. So we've heard a lot of talk today specifically about the lack of funding in Canada. And question, I suppose, is, are you into cannabis?
Oh, thank you for that question.
Thank you for the question. Obviously.
I don't know how to answer that. Let's see. Look, I would say that it's really interesting because when I talk to gold analysts in the Toronto community, I'm finding out they're picking up cannabis as their sideline. I'm not saying they're picking up cannabis. I'm saying they're picking it up as their sideline of coverage. And we brought some sell side over to Yerington to Nevada through that, and we had a bunch of these, gold analysts covering cannabis on the side, going into Nevada, which is legalized it all. So I got an earful of sort of what this technology and whatever else. It is, I was going to say mind-blowing, but that's probably the wrong term to use in the context. But at the end of the day, there are going to be moral issues associated with it, there are going to be legal issues associated, particularly in the US. You can't use, even in states that legalize it, you can't have, it has to be cash-based, all this other stuff. I would say from an ethical point of view, if there's going to be money made from it, I'd rather it's governments getting the taxes than basically the criminal element getting what they get. So, but if you look at how much money the liquor industry, the tobacco industry make, whether they dive in there or not, I can understand why the entrepreneurs would be trying to take a shot at it.
And do you agree with the view that it potentially could be a reason for sort of the flat North American market?
No, I don't. And the reason I don't is that my sense is that it's actually a flat Canadian market, not a flat US market, because I actually see more interest in the US market now than I'm seeing in Canada, because the US market's been underinvested in resources. They were in all the other things. Now they're beginning to actually, they're now being, they're being more positive about the outlook of commodities, so they're beginning to come back in, as they have been, we've seen over the past 2 years in the UK. But my sense is that the Canadian market has been overly exposed, in sort of the broad financial market, overly exposed to resources. And for a variety of reasons, there's probably sort of top-level macro decisions that are being made that they need to either balance that down or and grow other parts of the portfolio. So my sense is that it's just pressure on the fund managers to say it's not gold money going to cannabis or gold money going into cryptocurrencies. It's basically just, hey, let's lighten up the load here and sort of have a little more of a balanced portfolio.
Okay. And finally, because it's a requisite question at all conferences now, and as a fellow American, what's your view on Trump in context of the global mining industry, obviously?
I was at a small session in Beijing with the CEO of JP Morgan, who was not in favor of Trump during the election cycle. But after the election, he said, he's the captain of the aircraft, so we got to back the captain of the aircraft. So he is navigating the ride on the biggest country in the world still. I've heard other people, even over the past couple of weeks, saying, and Rick, we heard it, the government is actually helping. There's been a mind shift in terms of the mining sector. It is clear the government policy toward the mining sector is the best we've seen in 40, 50 years. And other people would say that the direction is right of government taking place. Now, people outside the US may not like the concept of reciprocity, but a future president will actually get some benefits from that in their own lobbying. When it comes to style, that's a completely different story. So the effects of what's taking place is probably better. It's happening that it's balancing for a reasonable outcome, but the direction, the volatility, the scariness of it all is actually I can understand why people would be troubled.
Well, for the sake of time, and I think everybody's probably keen to hear more, but can catch you upstairs, no doubt. Thank you very much for all of your comments and all of your
great questions.
efforts.
Thank you very much.
I'll leave you
Except
to
for the cannabis
close us.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. Okay.